I'm Sam, and before I get rolling with this tale, I've got something to say right off the bat. Hold off on judging me until you've heard the whole thing, alright? Stick with it to the end, 'cause there's some real-life nuggets in here, stuff I reckon we can all chew on from what went down with me. For years, I'd say I was a happily married dude. My wife, Tammy, and I had this vibe going that was laid back, a blast, and full of chuckles. We kept things spicy in our own little way, and one trick up our sleeve was poking fun at each other. Now, if there was one topic Tammy loved yapping about, it was how she figured she was a rock star between the sheets. She had this running gag about being the best I'd ever had, and man, she wore that pride like a badge. Here's the kicker, she wasn't blowing smoke. She was damn good, and she knew it cold. Over time, she'd crow about it, not in a stuck-up way, mind you, but with this swagger that showed she believed in her game. Out of nowhere, she'd toss out reminders of what she could pull off, what she had in store, just to keep the spark crackling. It turned into this thing we did, a little jolt of thrill in our day-to-day. And me? I ate it up. Hearing her hype herself didn't rile me, it cracked me up. Sometimes, it even stoked the fire for what'd happen when we got some alone time. To me, it was no big deal, just our goofy way of keeping the marriage humming and lively. But I had no clue that one dumb quip, one little toss-away line, was about to flip everything upside down. One night, Tammy and I were chilling in the living room, winding down after a long haul of a day. The TV was mumbling in the background, but neither of us was glued to it, just noise to fill the quiet while we sprawled out. Tammy, true to form, was in one of her frisky moods. She kicked off her usual ribbing routine. That night was no exception. She flung her arms wide and spouted some wild nonsense about how she'd haul me off to the bedroom and have me belting out tunes in every language under the sun. I lost it, laughing so hard I was shaking my head at her cocky shtick. It was so over the top, I couldn't not grin. She kept piling it on, tossing in details, pumping herself up like she was some unbeatable legend. It was all in good fun, just our typical back-and-forth dance. Maybe the vibe got me going, or I just felt like dishing a little jab back her way. So, without overthinking it, I smirked and fired off, "My ex was always better than you in the sack." It slipped out as a goof, a lighthearted jab to tease her. I figured she'd sling something wilder right back, turn it into our usual sparring match. Maybe she'd roll her eyes and call me out, or scoop me up and hit me with a cheesy line like, "Guess I'll have to jog your memory on why you picked me." I was ready for her to ham it up, go big with some silly comeback. But nope, that's not how it played out. The second those words hit the air, her whole face shifted. Her grin evaporated, and she went ice cold in a heartbeat. It was like I'd flipped some hidden switch inside her. At first, I thought she was faking it, playing up the drama for laughs. But then, without a peep, she got up. Not a single word, just stood and walked out of the room. I figured she was pulling a mock sulk, trying to make a point where guilt tripped me a bit. You know how folks pretend to stew for a minute to mess with you? That's what I pegged it as. I half expected her to stroll back in, crack a wise one about how I needed my head checked, or sling some snarky comeback my way. But that didn't happen. She stayed gone the rest of the night. Come morning, I rolled out of bed thinking we'd be back to normal. I pictured her in the kitchen, brewing her usual coffee, maybe shooting me a sideways glance but letting it slide. I tossed out a casual "mornin'" to feel her out. Nothing, not a nod, not a look. She grabbed her mug and breezed past me like I was a ghost. That's when it sank in, she wasn't putting on an act or fishing for attention. She was legit pissed, deep down, no games mad. I kept telling myself Tammy just needed a breather. Some folks take their sweet time sorting out their feelings, and I figured I'd play the good guy by giving her some room to simmer down. Maybe a day or so, and she'd shake it off. But that night, when she breezed past me in the hallway like I was invisible, a knot started twisting in my gut. I gave it another shot, this time laying it out plain. "Tammy, come on, are we really not talking today?" She didn't even slow down, just marched straight to the bedroom and shut the door in my face. By day 2, the quiet was eating me alive. It wasn't just that she'd clammed up, she acted like I wasn't even there. I'd step into a room, and she'd either hightail it out or stare right through me like I was a ghost. That's the kind of cold shoulder you give some rando, not the guy you've built a life with. I started rewinding that moment in my head, picking it apart to see if I'd dropped something worse than I realized. It was just a dumb jab, wasn't it? A throwaway line to mess with her a little. But to her, it clearly hit different, way harder than I'd bargained for. By the middle of the week, I was running low on patience. Sure, I could own up to my crack being out of line, but was it worth her icing me out like this? It felt like we were locked in some weird standoff, except I was the only one waving a white flag. One night, I plopped down next to her on the couch, banking on the awkward silence to nudge her into saying something, anything. Nope. She just snatched the remote, flipped on the TV, and acted like I wasn't 2 feet away. That's when it clicked, this wasn't about her cooling off anymore. She'd made up her mind to shut me out completely. That stung worse than a slap. I always figured no matter what mess we stepped in, we'd hash it out. That's how it's supposed to work in a marriage, right? But there I was, in my own damn house, feeling like I was bunking with a stranger. Worst of all, I didn't have a clue how to fix it. By the end of the week, I'd talked myself into believing things would smooth over. I kept thinking she'd chill out eventually, maybe let me explain myself. I'd run through a dozen ways to say sorry in my head, how it was just a dumb joke, how our marriage was tougher than one boneheaded comment. But as the days dragged on and the silence hung heavy, a little voice in my head started whispering doubts. Maybe I'd misjudged how bad my words had sliced her. Maybe this wasn't even about the joke anymore. That night, I heard the front door swing open and shut. Tammy walked in, face blank as a stone wall, not sparing me a glance. She dug into her bag, pulled out a fat stack of papers, and headed for the dining table. She dropped them in front of me and slid them across with a curt, "Sign it." My brain didn't even catch up at first. I scrunched my brow, staring down at the pile, trying to piece together what the hell was going on. Then the words at the top smacked me square in the face. "What's this?" I mumbled, my voice barely scraping above a whisper. Tammy's expression didn't budge, cold as ever, her eyes drained of the spark I'd known for years. "We're done, Sam," she said flat out. I let out a shaky laugh, half hoping this was her pulling some twisted payback stunt. Part of me was waiting for her to crack, flash a smirk, and say, "How's that feel, huh?" But that never happened. She just stood there, arms folded tight, waiting for me to grab a pen and torch our marriage. That's when it hit me, she wasn't messing around. This wasn't some big, dramatic flex to prove a point. She'd gone and filed for divorce. Over a damn joke. The air whooshed out of me as I gawked at those papers. I wanted to yell that this was nuts, that we'd weathered way bigger storms together, and she was really ready to ditch it all over one stupid line. But one look at her told me her mind was set in concrete. I wasn't signing squat. My gut screamed to fix this, to make her see I didn't mean any harm. I figured if I could just lay it out, spill my side, she'd come around and see it straight. So I tried. I told her it was nothing but a goof, a brainless jab that didn't mean a damn thing. I laid it all out for Tammy, how much I loved her, how rock solid our marriage had been, and how flat out crazy it was to chuck it all over one dumb line. But every time I opened my mouth, it was like yakking at a brick wall. She'd barely grunt back, just shaking her head, not giving me an inch to work with. When talking sense didn't cut it, I started apologizing, over and over. I told her I was sorry for bruising her feelings, that I'd never have cracked that joke if I'd known, and I'd yank it back in a second if I could. I swallowed every ounce of pride, shoved my ego out the door, and damn near pleaded with her to rethink this. But no matter what I threw out there, it didn't move the needle. She'd already locked in her decision. That joke. She didn't see it as a laugh anymore, she took it as gospel. In her mind, me saying that meant I'd been stewing over my ex. She couldn't even fathom I'd just tossed it out to rile her up. Nope, she was dead set that I'd sized her up against my past, that I'd been replaying old bedroom memories so much I could still recite the play-by-play. To her, it wasn't a jab, it was me spilling some deep, dark truth. I tried to set her straight, swearing my ex was just a faded Polaroid, a dusty old chapter one hadn't flipped open in years. But she wasn't having it. She'd already spun this whole new story in her head, one where I'd never really let go, where I'd been pining for someone else while crashing next to her every night. Didn't matter how much I protested or swore she'd got it twisted, she believed what she wanted to believe. It dawned on me I wasn't just battling to clear up a joke anymore. I was up against some warped version of Sam she'd cooked up in her brain. And no matter how hard I hammered away at it, she wasn't budging. Scarier still, I couldn't do a damn thing to shift her gears. The days after that night blurred into a haze. I'd drag myself out of bed, sit in the thick quiet, watch her dodge me like I was a stranger. All of it felt like my marriage was crumbling frame by frame in slow-mo. At first, I was pissed at myself for even saying it. I kept wishing I could hit rewind, stuff those words back down my throat before they ever slipped out. If I'd just chuckled instead, or picked a different zinger, maybe we wouldn't be here. Maybe I'd torched everything with my own boneheaded move. But the more I mulled it over, the more I wondered if this was really about that one line. How could a single goofy jab, meant to get a laugh, be enough to nuke a whole marriage? Was what we had so flimsy that one slip could blow it apart? Did Tammy even love me like I thought she did? Or had I been missing some bigger crack all along? The deeper I dug, the antsier I got. Maybe this wasn't just about what came out of my mouth. Tammy might have been hauling around doubts I never clocked. She always strutted that confidence, least that's what she let me see. But what if it was all a front? What if she'd been hyping herself up to drown out her own noise as much as to sell it to me? Then, bam, another thought slammed me like a gut punch. What if she'd already checked out way before this mess? What if she'd been itching for a way out, and I just dropped the perfect excuse in her lap? You don't trash a life together over a quip unless you're already halfway out the door. I wrestled with that mess in my head, keeping it to myself, 'cause one thing was getting crystal clear, she wasn't gonna forgive me. She wouldn't sit down and talk it out. She wasn't about to fight for what we had. And if she wasn't willing to lift a finger, maybe I'd been the only one clinging to this thing from the jump. I spent another week trying to patch up what felt like a lost cause. Didn't matter what I said or how hard I pushed, Tammy wouldn't give an inch. When she slapped those divorce papers down in front of me again, I didn't even tear up this time. I didn't grovel, didn't kick up a fuss. I just locked eyes with Tammy and threw out one last Hail Mary. You really ready to toss our whole marriage in the trash over this? She didn't flinch, just shot back, you already did. And that was that. Right then, it hit me, I'd been clinging to something that had already slipped through my fingers. So I signed the papers. Not 'cause I was itching to. Not 'cause my love for her dried up. But 'cause I finally got it, a marriage where one slip, one dumb quip, can blow it all to bits ain't worth the fight. Real love oughta weather a storm or two. A solid marriage should have some give, some space for a screw-up and a sorry. But if Tammy really loved me, she'd have heard me out. If she trusted me deep down, she'd have seen where I was coming from. She didn't, so I had to cut the cord. I'd love to say I strutted off with my chin up, feeling like a weight lifted, but nah, it hurt like a son of a gun. Still does. What gets me worse, though, is knowing I was the only one swinging for us. A marriage where just one guy's in the ring. That's already a TKO. Looking back, this whole mess taught me stuff I never figured I'd learn the hard way. You hear folks say experience is the best coach, but I didn't think my own marriage would turn into the damn playbook. It's tempting to boil it down and say, oh, he shouldn't have cracked that joke, or, she's too touchy. But life ain't that clean cut. When feelings get tangled up, people do stuff that don't add up on paper. And that's exactly how this went down. Here's what I picked up along the way. Talking's the backbone of it all. If one lousy zinger can crater your whole deal, something's already rotten underneath. 'Cause let's keep it real, couples who've got it together don't split over a single dumb line. They chew it over, spill what's eating them, try to get on the same page. Me? Tammy didn't give me a shot at that. She bolted the door and threw away the key. That's when it clicked. If your partner won't sit down and hash it out straight, you're building on quicksand. It might hold up for a spell, but the first big gust'll knock it flat. Pride and shaky confidence can choke out love. I used to think love was this unstoppable force, that if two people had each other's backs, they'd muscle through any snag. Turns out, that's not a given. Sometimes ego's got more juice than affection. Pride's like a slow leak in the tank. If someone's clinging to it tighter than their partner, all the love in the world won't keep it afloat. If they won't step up for you, don't break your back for them. I spent days busting my hump to patch this up, saying sorry, laying out my side, giving her room. I threw everything I had at it to prove our marriage was worth a damn. But here's the rub, it takes two to tango. A relationship shouldn't feel like you're slugging it out solo. If they won't meet you in the middle, you're better off walking. Not every wisecrack's a winner, but not every meltdown's fair either. I ain't gonna pretend I was spotless here. I stirred the pot. I poked at her ego, knowing she strutted her stuff on that topic. I own that. But did it really warrant her torching our life together? That's the part that still smarts. Yeah, I might have flicked the lighter, but she's the one who doused it in gas and struck the match. A good relationship can take a few bumps, missteps, bad gags, whatever. In the end, I'll cop to my share. But let's not kid ourselves, Tammy blew it way out of proportion. And I can't shake this thought, if the tables turned, if she'd tossed out some quip about her ex, would I have run to a lawyer and called it quits?